So welcome back to the SEEKS research training. Today's module is going to focus on the SEEKS enrollment process. And for those of you that have just been watching my modules, you'll be excited because Charlene's here today. So yay. So do you want to provide the overview and walk us through?
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Charlene Paris with the SEEKS project. And today our training goals for our enrollment workflow are to describe how the research participant gets enrolled in the SEEKS project. And then we're going to identify the key staff, so the CIL staff that are involved in that enrollment process, the ones that the participants will be in contact with. And then we'll describe the process to differentiate between control and treatment files once a participant is enrolled. And finally, this workflow will provide a tool for fidelity for the enrollment process. So our key players involved in this process will be the CIL, so the Center for Independent Living intake or receptionist. And so that's the person that the initial contact that the consumer will come in contact with. And then our SOAR benefits counseling advocate, and that individual will do the SSI, SSDI eligibility assessment, and also will review the permission to contact form with the participant. And then finally, we have peer data collectors who will be involved, and they're the people that are responsible for getting the consent to participate in the project and also data collection. So now we're going to go over the workflow, and this workflow is really intended, as I mentioned before, it's a tool for you to use to, it provides step-by-step procedures on how to enroll someone, and you'll have a copy of the actual workflow itself to follow as a desk aid. So here's for people who like a visual, here's an overview of the workflow process. And this one has a few, it has some written summaries. And then we have, if we can go to the next slide, we have another one that is a little more visual for people that like more pictures. And so you see it starts with the consumer contacting the Center for Independent Living, contacting, and then they come in contact with the CIL staff. If they want to apply for Social Security disability, they do the eligibility, the SSI, SSDI eligibility, permission to contact form, and then we just go through the whole process that I'm going to review with you here step by step.
Great. And I just wanted to point out that anything that's white, a white box or white arrows, is a CIL staff. And anything that's kind of a yellow box or the yellow arrows, that's where the peer data collector takes over. So this process shows both what the CIL staff are doing, but also what the peer data collectors are doing.
So the first step in the enrollment process is that the consumer expresses an interest in applying for SSI, SSDI. If you recall that that is the group that we're targeting. So that's our first indication that the person may be eligible for our project. So once they've contacted, they'll contact the intake, your Center for Independent Living intake person, and then that person is going to connect them with the SOAR benefits counseling advocate. And then our next step is that the SOAR benefits counseling advocate is going to assess the individual for SSI, SSDI eligibility. And that there's a training specifically for this assessment. So the SOAR benefits counseling advocate will be trained to use an assessment tool that we've developed to determine whether or not it looks like the person's eligible for Social Security disability, or that's another way of saying SSI, SSDI. And if they are not eligible, if it turns out that they don't appear to be eligible for SSI, SSDI, then it'll be up to the Center for Independent Living to decide how to proceed. So they'll just follow their business as usual process. If it looks like they are eligible, then we're going to move on to step 3. And step 3 is where the SOAR benefits counseling advocate reviews the permission to contact with the potential, with the participant. And that permission to contact form is in Qualtrics, and Yvonne and Sarah are going to talk a little bit about that in just a second, and they'll actually do a role play with that script. But the purpose of that is really to inform the person, is to introduce the person to the idea of the study, to assess their eligibility for the study, and to ask if they agree to be contacted for it.
Great. So we're going to do a role play. And so we're going to actually go to the Qualtrics form. So let me stop sharing for a second so we can go to that form. So before we start our role play, Charlene has this great introduction that you can use to kind of transition from discussing the SSA eligibility to the form. So we'll eventually work this into the form, but Charlene's going to demonstrate it for us. And then I'm going to play a CIL staff who is trying to talk to Sarah to see if she is interested in being contacted by the research team. So Charlene, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with, I'm assuming I've just finished doing the SSI, SSDI eligibility assessment with the individual, and which you'll be trained on later. But I'm going to pick up the conversation from following that. So based on these questions, it looks like you meet the basic requirements for Social Security disability. So you have a couple of options. First of all, our center is part of a research study designed to understand what helps people with disabilities to improve income and community participation. We can provide services to you through that study or through our regular services. If you participate in the study, you can offer input and you can get paid for your input, and you have the potential to help other individuals who are in a similar situation to you. Is it okay if I share a little bit of information with you about the study, and then you can decide if you want someone to contact you to give you more details, so you can then decide if you'd like to participate. It would take us about 10-15 minutes to go over this information. And then if they say yes, you say great, and you go to the next to Yvonne and Sarah's role play.
Great. So I'm going to share my screen. And Sarah, I assume you're ready for your acting debut. All right. So this is actually the screen that you're seeing is the actual form that is in Qualtrics. And so on the PowerPoint, there's a link to it. And you could also just hold up your phone and there's a QR code that would take you to the screen. What you would ideally do is we would have, if Sarah's my consumer, I would have her bringing up on her phone, or we would go over it on a computer together, but she's going to need to sign it. And so she would actually have it up and we would talk through it together if possible. So, so Sarah, as we explained, you're eligible, you're potentially eligible for SSA, and so SSI, SSDI. So I just want to tell you a little bit more about the study. And this is just for you to get a sense as to whether you want to hear more about it. And if you do, you give me information and then we would share that with the research team and they would contact you to decide. You don't have to decide today if you want to do it or not do it, but you have to let me know if you're willing to at least talk to the research team or not. So as I mentioned earlier, or as Charlene mentioned earlier, we're part of a research study to better understand what helps individuals with disabilities find and keep good jobs, make more money, meet new people. And we call the study SEEK. So I'm going to keep saying SEEKs, but that's the idea of the study. If you are interested in being part of the study, you would give us permission to share information with the research team, your race and ethnicity, your what we have listed as your primary and secondary disability, and the Medicaid waivers you're receiving. But that's only if you give us permission. And then you'd also allow the research team to contact you and interview you every 6 months for about 20 minutes. And so it could be up to 6 times, depending on how long you're in the study. And as we mentioned, that's where you would get paid, is for the time, the 20 minutes you spend answering the question. So that's the payment piece. And the interviews are going to ask you about your employment history, your job and pay if you're working, your application for SSI, SSDI if you get approved, any education or training you might be getting, how many people you spend time with during the week, any services you get for employment or applying for SSI, SSDI, or getting connected just to others in the community, your opinion on working and getting SSI, SSDI, and your opinion on getting benefits counseling. So if you think that this might be of interest and you'd be willing to get contacted, right, you should also know that if you join the study, in addition to giving us information every 6 months, you would also then work with the staff at our Center for Independent Living, which you could still do even if you're not in the study. But if you're in the study, you get assigned to one or two groups. You could be in the group that works with staff who are trained in new ways to kind of offer services, or staff who are using kind of the traditional ways that we offer services. Staff, regardless, staff will help you with the SSI, SSDI application assistance, gaining meaningful employment if that's of interest to you, and understanding how employment and SSI, SSDI work together. So staff will still help you with those things if they're of interest to you, but it's just we're trying this new approach versus the way that we normally do things. So let me just ask you some questions to make sure that if you are interested, you're even eligible for the study. Are you interested in applying for SSI, SSDI?
Yes, I am.
Great. Are you between 18 and 60?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Do you think you're willing to work with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation?
Yeah, I think so.
Great.
So yes.
And then what's the primary language that you like to do business in if we were to contact you?
English.
English, all right, perfect. Thanks. All right, so if you're willing to give me the information with the contact information, or you're willing to share the information on this form, then the research team would reach out to you. So are you okay if we give them your first and last name?
Yes.
All right, and what's a good phone number to reach you at?
317-274-7260.
All right. And what about, do you have an email address in case we can't reach you by phone?
Sure. It is my first and last name at gmail.com.
Great. And let's say we need to mail you something in case we can't get a hold of you. What's a good mailing address? And if you join the study, we'd need to mail the checks to you, but what's a good mailing address?
2724 Mead Street.
MEAD?
E. Yep.
Okay. Where's that?
Denver. And it's 80211.
Great. And let's say I'm trying to reach you and I can't get a hold of you. You know, maybe you move, maybe something's going on and it's just difficult. Is there someone that I could reach out to who maybe could help me get in touch with you?
Yes, you could reach out to Yvonne.
Okay. And does Yvonne have a phone number?
Yes, her phone number is 720-303-0918.
Great, thank you. And do you know the name of the independent living specialist you're going to be working with?
Yes, I think I'll be working with Kathy.
Kathy, great, that's great. All right, so we've got a lot of different ways that the research team can reach out to you. Is there a preferred way? Do you want them to call you, text you, email, talk to you in person when you meet with your living?
Probably email is the best way.
Great. And then this is where you would need to sign the form. So to give permission so that we can reach out to you. So, and if the person can't sign it, they can do an X, right? They can do something to just kind of indicate that they've read the form, but we need the signature. So that's great. What we're going to do next is we're going to actually pass on your information to the peer data collectors. And within the next 2 to 3 days, you should be getting a call from them, or sorry, an email from them, because you want to do email. So if you can kind of be on the lookout for that. And in the email, they will put SEEKS and Center for Independent Living so that you'll know what it's about. So thank you. Thanks for being willing to talk to people about it. All right. So that is our little role play. I'm going to actually before I turn it back over to Charlene, I want to share one more thing. So I'll reshare the slides. When you're doing this, if you're at a tier 2 site, which means your site only has treatment participants or only offers the control services for participants, you can't actually tell participants that they'll automatically be in one group or the other. You need to keep that quiet because it changes. You get different people enroll based on their willingness to be in one group or the other. And so we need to be equal for everyone, like we talked about in the research overview piece. We need to be consistent for tier 2 sites as well as tier 1 sites. So sites that offer both treatment and control and sites that only offer one. The process where you contact them, get permission to contact needs to look the same, and the process where we reach out to them needs to look the same. And so you really need to keep it quiet. So just keep this little girl in your head. It's a secret until they get to be in the treatment or the control. But we really don't want to bias people so that it's a truer test. And Charlene, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. So after our after the SOAR Benefits Counseling Advocate has talked to the individual and done the permission to contact that Yvonne and Sarah just role played, and they've agreed to be contacted, we have our peer data collectors get involved. And there's a separate training for them, and they are individuals that are that will contract with. So they're independent contractors, but just to kind of follow through with the whole workflow, they are involved in the next step. So if they agree to be contacted, then the peer data collector is going to review the consent form for the study with that individual. And if they agree to participate, then they're going to be randomly assigned to either the control group or the treatment group that we've talked about. And then if we go to the next slide, if they're, then CI International is going to notify the SEEKS administrative team whether or not the person is in control or treatment. And then, so that's our step 5. Step 6 is that we will inform, so the SEEKS administrative team is going to inform the Centers for Independent Living about these new participants. And there's a little different procedure whether they're in control or treatment. So for control group participants, we will send a notification form, which I'll show you here in just a minute, to the independent living manager. And the independent living manager is going to flag the case as a control case in their database. And if your center uses hard files or paper files, you'll color code that. The independent living manager will color code that as well. And then the manager will refer the case to whichever staff person is appropriate, as long as they're not, the one that condition is they cannot be working with the treatment group. So any business as usual staff or other staff, they'll assign them to that person. And then for the treatment group, the SEEKS administrative team will send that same form, the notification form, to the SOAR Benefits Counseling Advocate. And then that individual, the SOAR advocate, will flag the case similar to previous, to the control group. They will flag the case as treatment in the database, and they're going to color code paper files. And then because it's a treatment, an intervention group participant, the SOAR Benefits Counseling Advocate is going to contact that person within 2 business days of receiving the notification form to set up their initial meeting. And so this next slide, I want to show you what the form looks like. So this is your form that will be emailed to you. And you see it'll have your center listed on there. It'll have the consumer's name. And this box in the middle will say treatment or control, whichever is applicable. And then we'll ask that you ensure that just those steps that I just talked about, that you've indicated that the person is either treatment or control in your database and your paper files.
And that's it.
And that's it, yeah.
So if you have questions around enrollment, we can talk about it on our biweekly calls. The permission to contact form is evolving. And so when we actually have kind of a final version, we'll show that on the call too, so that everyone kind of has the up-to-date form. And but we'll incorporate some of what Charlene said in her piece. So yeah, so we look forward to hearing from you guys. Charlene, do you have anything else that you want to say?
I just want to remind folks that we do have an enrollment workflow, a written workflow that you will have access to, and that really I encourage you to use that as your desk aid as you are learning this process.
Great. Yeah, and it's not going to go well at the beginning. It'll be a little awkward, but it'll get much easier, and you'll end up making it your own.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.